More breaking news now. This from Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Public Safety Department has just sent out this tweet. I'm going to read it to you here. Alert. There is an active shooter in the area of Wilkins and Shady. Avoid the area. More info will be released when it is available.
We understand police have confirmed there is a shooting near the Tree of Life Synagogue, or that there has been. Here are some pictures that we have, live pictures coming from that area. Nick Valencia is following the developments for us. Nick, what else have you learned?
Hey there, Victor and Christy. All of this is still a very fluid situation, but we can confirm now from the Pittsburgh Public Safety Twitter handle that this is an active shooter situation. The website for the Tree of Life, which is located in East Pittsburgh, it says that their services, Saturday service is Shabbat. It's the busiest service day of the week. It started at about 9:45 a.m. according to the Tree of Life Synagogue website. The first reports of this active shooter were just after 10:20 this morning from affiliate KDKA, whose images you're looking at there now. There are also reports that there are ambulances on the scene, which we could see there with our own eyes, as well as multiple police officers that have made their way to the scene. All of this still a very fluid situation. We're working on gathering details. So far, we can confirm, though, that there is an active shooter situation in East Pittsburgh at the Tree of Life Synagogue on their busiest service day of the week. Their service, again, started at 9:45. These reports come in at just after 10:20 this morning. We're still working on gathering information, guys. We'll get more to you when we can.
Hey, Nick, I want to be pretty precise about this. We have on the screen near the synagogue, and I just heard at the synagogue. Do we know if this shooting was inside, outside, or just in the vicinity of?
Well, right now we should just go by what the Pittsburgh Public Safety is saying. Wilkins and Shady, they're saying people should avoid that area. I'm not quite familiar with the Pittsburgh area. I don't know if any of you guys are, but this alert here coming from the Pittsburgh Public Safety saying that this synagogue, near the synagogue, perhaps, around the area. And these images, the first images that we're getting now from our local affiliates. Guys.
So I guess one of the other biggest questions is, if this was inside, is the shooter still there? Because when we say active shooter, we're saying they don't have that shooter in custody, or they don't have their eyes on who that shooter is, and they may not have that shooter cornered. When you watch this, what do you...
Christy, you may have somebody in custody, or you may have somebody down. They don't know if there are other accomplices. I think as we make this pivot from talking about bombings to talking about active shooters, most important thing we've got to tell the public is this. There are 4 things that you do in an active shooter situation. The first is run. Get out of there. If you cannot do that, hide. And there's a difference between concealment and cover. And then third, fight if you have to. And lastly, and critically important, tell. Go to the law enforcement and give them as many details as possible. Run, hide, fight, tell, in that order.
Obviously, a pretty large police presence here, and we saw some men with tactical gear. We don't know in which direction they were going, right? So we don't want to assume, we don't want to speculate, but we can show you exactly what is happening here and report what is coming from the Pittsburgh Public Safety Department as well.
Oh, wait a minute, and I just want to point out...
That's a message for us.
New tweet, okay. Okay, we see it. So again, the tweet from the public safety is that there is an active shooter in the area of Wilkins and Shady Avenue, and they're asking all the public to just avoid that area right now. And as Victor said, obviously there are ambulances there, which would signify that there are people who may be hurt. We do not know that to be. We have not heard of injuries. We have not heard of how many people may be injured, how many people may be shooting, how many people they're looking for. But when they say active shooter situation, that tells us that they do not have their eye on that shooter, or they are not talking to them.
So there's this breaking news. There's also the breaking news from the Buffalo Police Department. They're investigating a suspicious package that was found near the post office there. James Gagliano, Samantha Vinograt, thank you both. We'll take a quick break and continue the coverage of both breaking news stories right here on CNN. Frederica Whitfield is up after that break.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello, everyone. I'm Frederica Whitfield in New York this Saturday. Thanks so much for being with me. We have breaking news. Let's begin with what's happening in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with an active shooter near a synagogue in that city. Police are on the scene right now. You see the images that we're getting in. CNN's Nick Valencia is tracking that story for us. So, Nick, what do we know about the circumstances here?
This is obviously a breaking news story for Rika, still a very fluid situation, but the reports of an active shooter were first released here just after 10:20 this morning. And according to the website for the Tree of Life Synagogue, which is in Pittsburgh, in the historic Squirrel Hill neighborhood of Pittsburgh, a very well-known historic Jewish neighborhood, the service there started at 9:45. It is Saturday Shabbat services, according to the website. Of course, it is the busiest day in any synagogue. 9:45 is when this service evidently started. 10:20, just after that, is when these reports of an active shooter just came to CNN here. We did speak to Sheriff's Deputy Kevin Krause, our assignment desk did. This is what he had to say, saying it's an active and fluent situation, and I can't talk right now, but we do have a little bit more information from the Pittsburgh Public Safety verified Twitter account confirming an active shooter. They're saying it's near this synagogue. There are other unconfirmed reports right now we're working to pin down here, but still a very fluid situation as you look at those images from our affiliate KDKA in Pittsburgh. Frederica.
And then, Nick, when we say active shooter situation, what do we know that may have preceded it to, get that label? Were there shots fired? Was it the site of an alleged gunman or people with guns? What?
So far, we've been unable to verify these reports, but local affiliates reporting that there were shots fired, potentially even shots fired at police by whoever this alleged gunman is. But again, still a very fluid situation for us here at CNN, Frederica. We're working to pin down that information and get some more corroborated information.
Okay. All right, Nick, let me interrupt you. Let's go to this live briefing right now.
We were dispatched to active gunfire at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Squirrel Hill. Right now, we have multiple casualties. We're working the situation. It is imperative that the neighbors in the community surrounding the Tree of Life Synagogue stay in their houses and shelter in place. Do not come out of your home right now. It is not safe. We'll give you an update as soon as we get one.
What is your name, sir?
Jason Lando, Lando.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commander. Thank you. And as soon as we get more information, I'm going to let public safety respond until we have stability. Once we have stability, I'll make a comment. But right now, Chris is the point of contact. Please do not contact police officials. And as soon as there is more information, he'll be bringing them back out and giving information to the public. The key issue right now is stay in your home. Lock your door. Stay in your home.
We can't answer any questions right now because it's ongoing, but this will be the staging area, and we'll be back and forth providing information as soon as it's available.
What is the address of Tree of Life?
I'm not sure.
Shady.
Excuse me, make a hole. Excuse me.
We're moving out of the way right now.
Shady and I'll be back.
So you can real brief but blunt there. Multiple casualties, shelter in place. People who live in that Squirrel Hill neighborhood of Pittsburgh need to stay where they are, stay indoors. You heard the officers there say lock doors, stay in the home. Multiple casualties near the Tree of Life Synagogue there in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood of Pittsburgh. I want to bring in some experts for me right now. Retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent James Galliano and CNN National Security Analyst Samantha Vinograd. All right, so let me hear from you first, James. You hear a very short but powerful information coming from the investigators there, multiple casualties.
Absolutely, and just looking at the signs of distress and the way that the operators, the SWAT operators were moving there, you could tell this is a scene where a lot of chaos has happened and it's still not all been fleshed out. That's usually what happens here, is they're trying to sort these things out. Initial reports are usually off. Keep in mind in this, we're teaching our police, our law enforcement, post-Columbine, which happened 19 years ago this April, they have to go to the sounds of the guns. Most active shooter situations, Fred, are resolved one way or the other within 5 to 10 minutes. These folks are going to the sound of the guns, and we pray for them all, and hopefully they're going into harm's way, they're doing good work, and making sure that there aren't casualties in this one.
All we know right now, service likely in place, Samantha, at the synagogue there, and not long after it getting underway, reports of shots being fired. We don't know how many people might be responsible for those shots, but give us an idea what the reflex is of these authorities who come on scene. And like James said, they react post-Columbine, just go toward the gunfire, but what else?
Well, certainly, we don't even know if the active shooter is still within the synagogue. But just to paint a picture for you, this is the busiest time for any synagogue of the week. My father's at synagogue right now in Connecticut. Jews worship during these hours, and so we may have a situation where there's an active shooter that opened fire on hundreds of people. We don't know that yet. We also don't know if he's still in the synagogue, whether there's a hostage situation, and if there's even an ability to get medical care to any of the casualties that have been mentioned at this point. This is a synagogue. It is in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood of Pittsburgh, and it's a residential neighborhood. So even if the active shooter has left the building, there are civilians surrounding the area that also could be at risk.
Art Roderick also with us. So, as a former U.S. Marshal, give us an idea of how reinforcements try to react to this. Yes, they'll go toward, gunfire, what they hear. They're going to see possibly people fleeing from this area that is, where they've heard the gunfire. But how else do they approach this? Unclear whether the gunman or gunmen happens to still be in place.
Yeah, Fred, we've heard the term. Unfortunately, we're all too familiar with run, hide, fight. But also the fourth thing we want to get done is to get these witness statements and get an identification of the individual as soon as possible. Now you can see law enforcement in a very ready position around here, moving around, and I think what they're fearful of is that this individual is not in the synagogue and he gets out into the public. Again, as was stated earlier, this is a residential neighborhood. The last thing they want is a hostage barricade situation at one of these residences. So they're telling the public to stay inside, stay in their homes, lock their doors, and report any unusual activity in the neighborhood. And that's exactly what's occurring right now. Law enforcement is very fearful that this individual could get out and get into somebody's house.
Okay, also want to bring in Selena Zito. Selena, usually we talk to you about politics, but you happen to know this area, Squirrel Hill, a neighborhood of Pittsburgh. What can you tell us about this residential area where the center point right now is this synagogue, the Tree of Life Synagogue?
So the Tree of Life Synagogue is located in, as you said, a residential neighborhood. It's, filled with old houses and sidewalks and tree lines. It's part of the city of Pittsburgh, but it's located outside the, sort of in the outskirts of the main city part. It's, my kids have gone to a couple bar mitzvahs there. I'm very familiar with it. It's not far from where I live. This is a conservative synagogue, and I'm en route right now to the scene. There have been 7 confirmed dead, although I did just hear from someone on scene who said that was 8 and that 2 SWAT officers have been shot, but I don't know their condition.
Okay. Well, we haven't confirmed that. But that gives us something in which to work off. We did see that SWAT team vehicle that did move into the area. And James, if I could ask you quickly, when you see so many different types of law enforcement, reinforcements moving in, who takes the lead, to make sure that they coordinate, particularly when it's still active?
To go back to the Columbine example, there were lessons learned from that where we cannot wait for a homogenous team, an intact SWAT team to show up. Whoever gets on scene, they've got to put together a hasty assault, and they've got to move to the sound of the guns and interdict the shooter and try to either force the person to give up or take that person out if necessary.
Sam?
And I just want to add from personal experience, many synagogues around the country have enhanced security over the past few years. At my local synagogue in Connecticut, there are security officers that are at the door on the High Holy Days and often on Shabbat services. So it's
What's
unclear.
the expected role in a case like that?
To try to identify a threat. They are armed, but typically it's to see if there is any kind of threat approaching the synagogue. And in this case, we don't know what kind of weapon the perpetrator had. But if there were this many casualties, James, I don't know if you have any thoughts on what it could be, but it is likely that there was some kind of security protocol in place that unfortunately did not succeed in deterring this person.
And Selena, if you're still with me, since you know the area, you said you live not far from this Tree of Life Synagogue. Is this a particularly large synagogue, one in which, security would be, significant at this facility, or perhaps even magnetometers when people are met at that synagogue?
Well, years ago, and I honestly can't remember what year it was, but I think it was in the 2000s, maybe it was like 99. There was an incident where there was a I believe it was a rabbi that was shot, and that did up the in the aftermath of that did up the security around synagogues in the area. But I don't know that there was any kind of other sort of like mags or security guards at the synagogue that I can recall.
Okay. So again, according to our Nick Valencia's reporting, roughly at about 10:20 a.m., this became an active shooter scene. A service at this synagogue, the Tree of Life Synagogue there in Pittsburgh in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood, typically begins at about 9:45. We did hear from authorities. That there have been multiple casualties, but again, we have no confirmation of exact numbers. Police also telling people to shelter in place. It is not safe, their words. Lock your doors, stay in your home. And President Trump just tweeting moments ago saying, watching the events unfolding in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, law enforcement on the scene, people in Squirrel Hill area should remain sheltered. Looks like multiple fatalities. Beware of active shooter. God bless all. Again, we heard from the police. They're saying multiple casualties, but no clarity on deaths or the extent of those casualties. Still with me now, James Galliano and Samantha Vinograd. Also, Selena Zito was on the phone with us. She is from that area. And then Art Roderick also with us. So, Art, what are your observations here? What's your calculus based on the observations of the kind of information that we're getting in, the images that we're seeing?
Yeah, it looks like they've established an outer perimeter here because you see law enforcement kind of in a standby mode on the outer perimeter where they've held press back. And I think we should hear a briefing here coming up pretty soon. So maybe, hopefully, they've established an inner perimeter and they have this individual cornered somewhere. And we could very well be talking about a hostage barricade situation. But hopefully they'll enlighten us here when the public affairs officer comes back. But you still see individuals in SWAT gear warming up. Earlier at the top of the hour here, I did see the Pittsburgh Mass Casualty Command Post roll by this particular scene. So it moved inside the outer perimeter. That very possibly could be a good sign that they have this individual pinned down somewhere.
So, James, when you have a densely populated area, a neighborhood, the focal point being a potential shooting scenario in the synagogue, if this shooter or shooters have left the synagogue or no longer in the immediate perimeter of the synagogue, there are lots of places to hide. That makes it very difficult when you've got a neighborhood situation like this. Explain the dynamics for law enforcement.
As a former FBI SWAT team leader, so I understand this just intrinsically, the difficulties, because as you are responding to a scene and we're instructing people, potential victims, to run, well, you never know if the bad guys have secreted themselves in that mass of people that are running out. So you've got to do immediate sorting and discernment to try to determine good guy from bad. Yeah. Let's make some careful distinctions here. There are three things that SWAT team leaders are looking at when they're arriving on scene right now. Is this still an active shooter, meaning is somebody gunning people down and we have to interdict them and bring them down? Number two, is it a barricade situation with hostages, or is it a barricade situation where it is just the shooter? Barricade situation with just the shooter, you're going to, as Art Roderick just pointed out, you're going to form a perimeter. You're going to do what we call contain and negotiate. There's no need to put more people into harm's way if there aren't potential more victims to be harmed. Yeah. A barricaded subject with hostages raises the ante more. Will this person continue to kill people, or are they holding on to them as some type of human currency to negotiate with the authorities? And then thirdly, obviously, the active shooter that we have to, law enforcement officers, they're brave individuals, the men and women that are swear out to that mission. They are to respond to the sound of the guns, go to the threat, and take that threat out. And then, Sam, you have all of that met with the urgency of trying to care for any who may be injured, because this is also a critical time in which to tend to any potential injuries.
Exactly. And if there was an assault rifle used, we can imagine that there are people that are in urgent need of care. We don't know how many people are dead. We don't know how many people are wounded.
And authorities did say multiple casualties, but we don't know the degrees.
Right. So the ability to get medical care to them or to convince the assailant to let them out is at this point unclear. And let's again keep in mind, there are likely hundreds of people that were at that service this morning, so the range of people affected is quite broad. And we don't know if the authorities have established contact with the active shooter and are engaged in any way in hostage negotiations to try to address some of those challenges.
All right, Sam, James, Art, and Selena, all stay with me. Again, we're going to take a short break for now, but active shooter situation taking place in Pittsburgh. All of this in and around the Tree of Life Synagogue. Police say there have been multiple casualties. They're urging people to stay and shelter in place. We'll be right back. Her perspective based on her working knowledge of the community there. So, James, as you see, the vehicles continue to pull up, whether they be EMS trucks, you know, to perhaps tend to any injured. You're also seeing reinforcements of law enforcement, SWAT vehicles, etc. It is still considered an active shooter scene, but still unclear whether the shooters inside or outside the synagogue. How do they approach this?
So obviously, as Art pointed out earlier, a perimeter is critical. You can't have anybody getting out of this web. You've got to make sure you've got a tight perimeter. And then the perimeter gets just made smaller and smaller and smaller. You basically have an inner perimeter, which is a concentric circle inside the outer perimeter. You've also got to have areas set up that as potential victims, people fleeing the scene are coming out, law enforcement then can do a hasty discernment. They try to glean who is that potential victim or somebody.
Okay. Let me ask you to hold on real quick. Let's listen to the reporter there at KDKA with her latest information. KDKA.
Yeah, we are hearing that people who work at KDKA have friends who have family members who were inside the synagogue whenever this happened. One woman that we know who had her two brothers that were inside the synagogue. We are working to talk to them and to get the very latest from when this all happened, what went through their minds, and what happened inside the synagogue. Obviously, we are still really early on. The number that Andy Sheehan has been giving you, that's the number right now. We are hearing reports that the number could be higher, and also we originally were told 2 officers shot. We are told that that number could continue to rise. We, of course, are still standing by. We're waiting for an update from Pittsburgh Police as well as Mayor Bill Peduto. We were told to stand here at the intersection of Murray Avenue and Northumberland to wait for an update. We're told that Murray Avenue is their staging ground. That's where they yelled for all of the officers to go as soon as the first arriving officers received fire from outside of the synagogue. They were told to use their police vehicles, to use whatever they could as a shield in order to get out of the way. We're standing right now behind a line of Pittsburgh police officers as well as state police officers, and there are some officials that are a little further down. For instance, just Ritz Fitzgerald, for instance, I see him there. They're talking to officers. So some of the leading officials in the city of Pittsburgh have now arrived here on Murray Avenue, and they are getting briefed. As Andy Sheehan mentioned, that suspect is in custody. We are told he is a male, a white male. We were told originally he was a heavier set white male wearing jeans with a beard. They also said that they found some magazines in the hallway. They also found shell casings throughout the building as they began their search in order to find victims and find people that were barricaded inside. They also were looking at a possible package that was being evaluated on the first floor. We're not sure if they believe that that's at all related to the suspect or suspects. At this time, we do know that there is one suspect in custody. However, we have not heard reports if there could possibly be more than
inside the synagogue. We have 3 officers who have been shot, and at this time we have no more information because we are still clearing the building and trying to figure out if the situation is safe, if there are any more threats inside the building. So that's all we have at this point, but the shooter is in custody. We have multiple casualties and 3 officers shot. Thank you.
Can you take a step by step?
Mr. Mayor, could you add anything at all?
We're being told. Once the situation stabilizes, there's still a lot of information that's missed. We just got to wait and we want to be sure when we have everything. So we'll be coming back to you. There are fatalities, but we're not commenting yet on what there are.
We'll be back to advise the media on a regular basis, but at this point, that's all we have. Okay. And we're still asking residents to stay inside their homes. It's not a safe situation yet.
All right, still considered a dangerous situation. You heard from officers there who are saying people still need to remain in home even though a shooter is in custody, but still unclear if there is any more of a threat taking place there at the Tree of Life Synagogue. They're in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood of Pittsburgh. You see the law enforcement presence there. They are clearing the building, according to the officers that you just heard there. They did, however, confirm that 3 officers have been shot, but still unclear the number in totality of casualties, but very sobering information. There are fatalities, at least one of the officers there said. Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf just tweeting, "We are still learning details about the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, but it is a serious situation. Pennsylvania State Police are assisting local first responders. Please stay away from the area and keep the congregants and law enforcement in your prayers." With me still, Art Roderick, James Galliano, and Sam Vinograd. All right, so very important to hear. There are multiple casualties. There are fatalities. We do know that 3 officers have been shot. But you heard the officers there who said the threat is not over, James, and why? They still have to sweep the area. They got to make sure that if there are multiple gunmen, they may have left the synagogue locality.
Absolutely, and Fred, I got to say this. I mean, you know, from 2000 to 2017, the FBI tracks these active shooter situations, and because this now looks to be a multiple casualty situation, we can now add this to that. From 2000 to 2017, there have been 220 of them with casualties, meaning those dead or wounded in the range of 2,200 of them. That's a grim reality. That's also prepared law enforcement for this. Every police department, no matter how small the municipality is, now trains with the state partners and their federal partners in this. I can tell you this, when you talk about officers being injured and down, most of them that I saw going in there were armed with their ballistic vests, right? Mm-hmm. Those ballistic vests don't stop every bullet. They're level 3, even level 4. They don't stop rifle rounds. If you've got injured people here, that means they were hit in a place that they didn't have body armor, or there might have been a long gun involved in this. We don't know for sure, but that would be indicia of that.
And Sam, we heard the officials there saying a gunman in custody. Interrogation begins right away?
Yes, and we also shouldn't rule out the possibility that there may be other active gunmen in the facility itself or in the neighborhood. We heard the authorities say that residents should remain sheltered in place, which really means they don't have information from the suspected shooter yet. They don't know if he was working alone, and they don't know what his motivations are. We may jump to conclusions that this was an anti-Semitic attack. This could have been a congregant. This could have been someone with a personal vendetta, any range of motivations. And based on that, until they've questioned him and really worked out who else he's been in touch with, I think the threat level will remain very high.
Art Roderick, I want to get to you in a moment, but first I've got Fred Rabner, who is a member of this Tree of Life Synagogue. So Fred, you ordinarily would be at today's service. Today you are not. So tell me what you're thinking and feeling right now.
You know, this is a pretty close-knit community, and this synagogue is blocks from my house, and a lot of members will walk there on a Saturday. I'm not a regular Saturday attender, but my child was bar mitzvahed at this synagogue, and probably know hundreds and hundreds of people that have been attending that synagogue for years. And everyone is just gut checking and calling all around the community to make sure that their loved ones and their family members are accounted for. But we all have been saying to each other over the last half hour that, yes, you know, my son's accounted for, my daughter's accounted for, my friends, close friends are accounted for. But the fact that undoubtedly all of us will know who those congregants are that have lost their lives to this tragedy is unmistakable. We will absolutely know who they are. This is a small community.
And Fred, has there ever been a time recently or otherwise where you have felt security is a worry at this synagogue?
Well, you know, there was a shooting at the synagogue previously where someone had an anti-Semitic swastika had been drawn on that synagogue in the past, I believe, and I think a rabbi was shot. And you know, there have been anti-Semitic efforts towards that synagogue in the past. But I believe it was several years ago. So, you know, we're not unfamiliar with that, but it's hard to accept when it's literally looking out my window. It's that close to home. It all, you know, we all see it all over the news, but it's really all of our living rooms. It's in all of our neighborhoods. So when we watch them across the country on the TV, I think we all can empathize and and realize that in a moment could be ours, and this is our turn, and this is just another in many long line of shootings and tragedies. It's got to stop. We have to do something. And I got to say, the officers are working so diligently. You see them flying up and down the street, gathering on the corners. I mean, they have moved into action as swiftly as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm. You live in the neighborhood. You weren't at the service there at the Tree of Life Synagogue today, but tell me more about what you see when you look out the window.
Well, you hear, you open your door and you hear sirens everywhere. The phone's ringing off the hook because everyone's checking on who's where and accounting for everyone. I was actually exercising at a gym that's a block away from there about a half hour before that. It's right in the main thoroughfare. It's right on a major corner in the neighborhood where people are, walking their dogs, jogging. There's parks right there. Hopefully that's a sole gunman, and they have him in custody.
As you call around to your friends, you mentioned other members who everyone feels like undoubtedly they know someone who was at service this morning. What are the expressed concerns that you're hearing from friends as you call around?
My neighbor, she's an older Jewish woman. Her and her husband walk to that synagogue every Saturday, and I always marvel at them as they walk by in the morning when I'm out with my dogs. Because, not a lot of people still keep the traditions and will walk and say use their car. But I haven't been able to get a hold of her. We knocked on her door and we're calling her phone. But I'm sure she's over there somewhere. I'm hoping she's okay.
And for the most part, when you do make contact with people at home, did they get the word that they need to remain in a safe place in their home? And if so, what are their thoughts about that?
Yeah, everyone is just shaken up. Everyone is just, tearful. You immediately can empathize with whoever the victims are and their families. We're going to know them. They are us, and we're them. And so, just as you have school shootings in other states, just you weep for those victims the same as they're your own. Same thing here. Everyone is just shaken up and upset. It's awful. It's awful.
Oh, Fred, our prayers are with you and everyone who are members of the Tree of Life Synagogue and everyone in the neighborhood. I know this is incredibly traumatizing, and our prayers are with everyone. Thank you so much for your time. Art Roderick is also still with us. And Art, when you hear from law enforcement there in their latest update that 3 officers were shot, right. They continue to try to clear the building, looking for any more potential threats, even though a shooter is in custody. How do they determine whether they have exhausted all measures to know that the threat is over?
Well, I mean, it seems they have somewhat control over the scene at this point in time, but, they've got to look for these suspicious packages. I think there was a report of a suspicious package in the synagogue, so they've got to go through that. They've got to locate this individual's vehicle and find out if there's anything in there that could pose a threat. But it seems like they have the scene under control to a certain degree. Interviewing this particular individual, there is a public safety threat here. They've got to find out if he acted alone, was there somebody else with him. But I'll tell you, Fred, in the recent past, during my time at the Department of Homeland Security, one of the most requested training courses that we had was first responder to mass casualty events. And usually, unfortunately, we're all too familiar, as Jim had stated earlier, regarding the amount of active shooters that we've had. These all tend to follow the same sort of outcome, where we have the initial response of officers just ad hoc forming a unit to go in and to actively take that out, and then within a short period of time you have the SWAT team showing up to assume control. So you've got establishment of perimeters to go ahead and take care of the situation, and that is exactly what happened during this particular shooting event.
All right, Art, thanks so much. Hold on for a moment. We want to take you now to some comments being made from Jeff Nicholstein. Let's listen.
Pittsburgh. We are the main fundraising planning organization for the Jewish community. Part of our function actually is We employ a Jewish community security director who is actually on his way in. He's a 28-year veteran with the FBI, so we look at the issue of security throughout the Jewish community.
Where were you this morning when you heard the news first?
I was in my house here in Squirrel Hill.
Can you paint a picture of how, when you heard that, what was going through your head at that moment?
You know, I was in Israel till yesterday, and landed back in Pittsburgh late yesterday afternoon, and a little jet lagged, and when I heard that, everything just total sadness, emotion, worry, and I ran over here as quickly as I could.
I heard that someone who I believe oversaw the synagogue previously, that you guys have had discussions in the past about this kind of situation, that the FBI has come and consulted on this kind of thing. Is that the case?
Yeah, that is correct. We've done lots of training on things like active shooters, and we've looked at hardening facilities as much as possible.
Describe for me how many people would have been inside the synagogue on a Saturday morning, and what types of people would have been in there, what they would have been doing.
So I can't tell you exactly how many were in there. It depends if there was some type of bar mitzvah or other special event which would bring more people. I would guess at Tree of Life, a typical Saturday morning would have, at that time in the morning, maybe 50, 60 people, I guess.
You talked to Mayor Bill Peduto. What did he pass along to you?
He just said we'll do everything he can. The city will do everything it can to help out. And I also heard from Keith Rothfuss this morning, who's on his way here as well. Really appreciate all the help from our local politicians.
Do you have security guards there during Saturday morning services? How big is security an issue for you guys?
I'm not a member at Tree of Life. I can't comment on their security practices. You'll have to talk to someone from the congregation.
And officer, we just heard from Chris Togneri that there is at least one, he was in custody, the shooter's in custody. Hearing that, and then after what's been happening this morning, how does that make you feel, sir?
Now I'm just sad. I'm really, I don't know what to tell you. My heart goes out to all these families. This should not be happening, period. It should not be happening in a synagogue. It should not be happening in our neighborhood here in Squirrel Hill.
Can you describe the situation at Wilkins and Shady? We're told it's not just one synagogue, right? There's a couple buildings there.
There's one building. There are several congregations that share the same building.
Can you tell me a little bit, if in that room, if people were trying to get out of that room, are there a number of exits available for that? What does it look like?
You know, I don't know which room they were in this morning. I can't comment. I'm sorry.
What's next for you in your position? What do you have to do? Who do you have to call?
So we're already in touch. I've been in touch with my colleague Brian Schreiber, the CEO at the JCC, and with our Jewish Community Security Director Brad Orsini and our Community Relations Director, and we're going to figure out what we need to do as a community to pull together, and that'll probably happen over the next 24 hours.
There are many cities that are streaming Pittsburgh News Live that are not familiar with Pittsburgh, and they don't understand the Jewish community in Squirrel Hill. Can you paint the picture for people that are watching that don't know Squirrel Hill?
Yeah, so Pittsburgh is very unique as far as its Jewish community goes. A little over 50, we just finished a community study, and it shows that a little over 50% of the Jewish community of greater Pittsburgh lives in or around this one neighborhood of Squirrel Hill. It's a high concentration of the Jewish community. It makes it very special, actually.
And just for people who are joining us right now, could you just repeat who you are, sir, and where you're with?
Yeah, I'm Jeff Finkelstein. I'm the president and CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh.
Our other reporter, Andy Sheen, said it's a conservative synagogue. Can you describe what that means?
A conservative synagogue is one that is traditional yet open to change and adaptation to modernity. I think is the easiest way to say it. Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And if we are still out here.
A very special place described by Jeff Finkelstein, CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh, which was terrorized today. Multiple fatalities are being reported. We don't have a number. Police, as you heard just moments ago, just said there are fatalities, there are multiple casualties, but 3 officers have been shot. Also, this comment coming from the Vice President, Mike Pence, just tweeting, monitoring reports of shooting at Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, praying for the fallen, the injured, all the families impacted, and our courageous first responders. God bless them all. All right, moments ago, we also heard from a woman whose daughter was at the scene of the shooting, and here's what she had to say.
They heard the shots, and they all, her mom and dad, her friend's mom and dad and son, they just all ran downstairs, I guess, and barricaded themselves in the basement. But once I heard that they had captured him, I thought, I got to come. I want to just go get her.
And so your daughter is still somewhere across the street?
Yeah, that they said there's police in the house, and that, you know, so for them they're safe, but they kept hearing gunfire and everything else. So.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I just want to get her.
Incredibly frightening situation. As far as we know, no one has been allowed out of the synagogue thus far. Authorities who did just take to the microphones moments ago said they're continuing to treat it as an active shooter scene, even though one alleged gunman is in custody. Back with me now, Sam Vinograd, James Galliano, Art Roderick, all with me now. So Sam, listening to the people who are familiar with this synagogue,